what is our role external, as well as internal, but really, you know, again, I look at things at a little higher level. So perhaps, and I've written a bunch of these down, as we went through the McKinsey report, as we got ready for the last meeting where we didn't really talk about this, and this meeting where we're not really going to talk about this, I think this is vital, that we are here to help the organization. And as commission members, we can sit here, we can approve things, but if we don't take them back to our communities, we're not interactive with the ACTs, with the MPOs, and perhaps with a multimodal system, then are we really doing the job for ODOT? So I look at it a little bit differently. Be happy to put these down in writing and move forward. I'd like to move forward though too.
Yes,
I haven't
so
felt
would
that
I.
yet.
Yeah,
So
and
thank you.
Part of it is we're waiting. We're in a little bit of a holding pattern on the McKinsey recommendations and such as well, which we want to make sure that there is some marrying of those recommendations with the work that we're wanting to do. I think, you know, one of the things as chair, setting the policy for Orgo and other initiatives and other new ways of thinking. Those are areas in which I want us to be having discussion, not necessarily the actual program, but in the policy setting of allowing different types of new technologies and new ways of thinking. So that innovation piece. So I think we're actually much more aligned by everything that you said. I don't know that we would have anyone who would disagree, but I think it's in where are we focusing our time too, and having the most meaningful impact on those statutorily defined roles that we have.
And truly, I recognize I'm brand new. Second meeting doesn't allow me to talk, so I appreciate the freedom to be able to talk and pass along just a different perspective because I'm not entrenched yet.
Which is great.
I'm there, but I'm not
It'll
entrenched
take at least
yet.
one more meeting for that to happen.
Please.
But I would just add, I don't think that it's necessarily a different view. We have two statutory obligations as commissioners. It's to set policy for the state, and it's to oversee the operations of the Oregon Department of Transportation. There are specific nuances within those things. And so I think that whether it's at a 30,000 foot level, and I think we have to trust that the department is executing those policies and that they are putting stuff in motion after it has been ratified by us and the decisions have been made. And we are empowered by the legislature to do that and funded by them to do that. So I don't think that we are at all at cross purposes. And I think what we're trying to do is to figure out, are there specific actions we can take that help us better articulate and carry out those statutory obligations, which are policy setting and oversight. I think if we can do that more effectively, I think it gives legislators a higher sense of confidence in the role that we are playing, and they don't feel like they have to play it. And I think the McKinsey report feeds into that a little bit, and then actions that we take independent of that also do. And I think that, and those are important because I think it's not just that someone else has told us what needs to be done, but we see as commissioners what we can be taking initiative to do. So I don't think that we're at cross purposes. And it is a virtue of you being a newbie because you have a fresh perspective versus us entrenched people. But I would say that it is statutory, and I think it was very clear in the workshop. Legislators also believed and had clarity in the job they want us to be doing.
Mm-hmm. And I think this will not be a one meeting conversation. This will be ongoing, but I think the best way to frame that is within a work plan for us to get through this. And so I like the idea of doing something similar to what Commissioner Lohman has done, which is jotting down in categories areas in which you feel that you'd like for us to focus, or areas in which you would like to have discussion points. I will then work with folks to create, essentially kind of populating that so we can have something that'll be able to use as a guidepost for us to move through this process. And, you know, this is a conversation that's been ongoing for many years, and I think this is an opportunity, as bumpy and clunky as it might get. We need to push through it, and we need to create that clarity, because it's not only something that I, as chair, need for us to have, but I think also is being asked of us from legislators as well. So, and it, quite frankly, is the responsible thing to do for the department to give the appropriate direction that's necessary. I think, you know, we heard things are good. We have a strong commission, and we have a lot of work in front of us, so we need to make sure that we are playing to our strengths. So if that, yes,
Madam
please.
Chair, just a couple of points responding to what other folks have said. Actually, we, at various times in my tenure here, we have sort of landed on which things we're going to prioritize. It's not as if we've been wandering for 10 years. You know, times change, constituents, you know, the makeup of the commission changes. So obviously priorities are going to change a little bit too. The other point is, just looking at this incomplete list, I think tells us we're going to set some priorities. We cannot, even if we just focused on what we might call policy, and I think it's going to depend on how we define policy, we can't even do all of that. That's a several year task, and part of our job, I think, is to recognize we've got all these responsibilities, and which ones are we going to focus most on soonest.
If we set policy guidelines, many of them will fall into, I mean, we want to see return on investment. We want to see, I mean, there's just a lot of things that contracting principles, that flows into other areas as well. I think it's, you know, marrying up, so the budget, and then how does that play into our priorities? And I just think there are a lot of pieces that flow from those, you know, that policy direction that we will be able to offer in a bit clearer way. Go ahead.
It might be I mean, maybe it's helpful for you if we prioritize what we're giving to you.
Oh, sure.
In
you
terms
bet.
of trying to bucket it so you know how to look at it, and just as a suggestion, I realize, you know, we can do it any number of ways, but, and then at the next meeting or whenever, we can talk about that publicly and
Right.
circulate the collective information.
I'm just glad we're not a 15-member commission.
All right, I
Please.
would agree with Sean on that. Furthermore, I think, you know, at the end of the day, this really isn't about any of us. Again, I always want to make sure we keep that in perspective, because as we learned over lunch, I mean, the changes that we're undergoing in our transportation system and as it relates to technology is going way faster than anybody could have ever anticipated. And in order to prepare for that and adapt to those changes, it is going to be a major role of the commission and how it operates and works collectively with the department and the director and the governor's office in terms of how we can meet those demands and those ever-changing landscapes that are coming upon us right now. So I think it's a perfect time that we're deliberating on this, and even more important, probably, that going forward, these conversations are just checked in upon every so often, because it's an important dialogue to have.
Yes. Thank you. So with that, do we feel comfortable with moving on? And if you could get those comments and thoughts to me, that would be great. And I'll put that together for the next meeting. Okay. So with that, I believe we have the consent agenda.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and with no conflicts identified, I would request approval of the consent calendar items.
Okay. Do we have any conflicts that need to be noted? If not, I would welcome a motion.
Move approval of the consent agenda?
Okay, further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Okay, so we will now convene an executive session, and so we will take a 2-minute break to allow folks to gather their things, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for doing this.
Oh, you're official, let's.